This week on Project Brupeg, I twist my nuts, I take off a rubber undergarment, and I stick my head in a dirty, dirty hole.
I took a stroll downtown this evening when I heard music echo through the night. The same old songs that I heard.
Before the engine can be installed, we need to fit the holding tanks. Before they can be installed, we need to fix some stuff that's going on with this fuel tank. We need to weld a transfer port in and fix a pesky fuel leak. Because I'm not super keen on exploding, this tank needs to be cleaned before I weld it.
There's less diesel than I thought. This is the very bottom end of the tank. I need to empty that bung out. I need to clear all of the rust out of here. Just give it a good sweep up, clean. Get this part of the tank sort of cleaned away so that I can then start welding.
So the point of doing the job that we're about to crack into is, at the moment Brupeg has half-inch fittings for fuel in and fuel out, and then a 3/8 fitting at the top for a return line. That's normally fine for diesel, and it has been for 50 years. You don't need to have any more than that. However, we need to transfer fuel around. Because we're using veggie oil as one of our primary fuels, it's a much thicker, heavier consistency oil. So moving things around with half-inch fuel lines if you've got a heavy oil is actually quite hard. So Brupeg is getting fitted with 1-inch fuel pickups, returns and transfers. So this is basically a big bulk transfer fitting that I need to weld into the tank. And the sole purpose of this is to move fuel from one tank to another. It's not to run the engine on. We don't need a 1-inch fuel line to run the engine. We do need a 1-inch fuel line to be able to move stuff around the boat. The half-inch fuel lines are still going to be our engine feed lines, but these big guys that go from the front tanks right up at the front storage at the bow, that can bring oil all the way back, they also need to be able to pump into here, so we have 1 inch going from one end of the boat to the other. So what I need to do is get this tank into a position where we can weld it. So I need to get the diesel out of there and give the whole thing a good wash down so it's not flammable. Then I need to hole saw through this bulkhead, fit the pipe that I just showed you, and then we're going to TIG weld that in so that there's no sparks and rubbish inside the engine room. The other tank on this side over here has already had that work done and fitted. That's the fitting there sticking out of the wall, just a tiny little fitting you see. This tank was full of diesel. We've transferred everything across, so now it's time to get the welding done on this tank. And the reason I'm doing it right now is because it's practically impossible to do this once the holding tanks are in. So we need to get this done, put the holding tanks in, and then we can start getting the engine in. Hello, if you suffer from hair loss and you don't want to resort to funny gimmicks to hide your beautiful, beautiful scalp, then you need to use something that's backed by science. Science. Exactly, Samantha. Hereditary hair loss runs in my family. Since I've been using MD Hair, I think it's made a real difference, don't you? MD Hair uses AI technology to analyse your hair and customise a treatment pack. For example, a woman over 50 with genetic hair loss will receive a different kind of supplement than a 30-year-old with postpartum hair loss. In all seriousness, genetics are not on my side. My granddad had a mean comb over. My dad had receding hairlines, so guess what's in store for me in the future?
MD Hair offer dermatologist support. You can actually chat with someone if you need to. It's all natural ingredients, it's customised to each person, non-toxic, it's sulfate and paraben free, cruelty free, and the packaging is recyclable.
So for example, the kit that I was sent to deal with my stage 2 hair loss included shampoo and conditioner that's enhanced with active plant proteins. There's a hair serum with potent DHT blockers to stimulate hair follicles for thicker hair. There's some customised supplements. These are great for age-related or genetic hair loss like I have. And finally, marine collagen. This supports healthy collagen production. MD Hair are offering an amazing 70% discount off your first monthly kit with full-size products if you use the link and the promo code in the description below. I emptied this tank months ago, and this is basically the residue that's left over that I couldn't pull out using the pipes and so on. So I've climbed in the tank and I'm using my vacuum oil pump to pull the last of this diesel out so that I can get in there and start washing this tank out and open that bung so all of this water can then drain out of the tank. This is a 50-year-old steel fuel tank. It's normal to not paint inside steel fuel tanks because the diesel stops any rust. About once every 3 years you open these tanks up and give them a real good thorough clean like we've just done now. So this is a pretty normal process on this boat and any commercial boats. Now that the tank's clean, it's time to jump in and start cutting some holes into the bulkhead. First up, I need to start with a 1/4 inch centre hole. and then a 40mm hole saw so that it's ready for the fitting to weld into.
A bit of cutting oil will make that a lot easier.
This is going to be a high volume fuel transfer pickup and release. Need to get that welded in. It's going to be TIG welded. That's why I'm not worried about painting first, because TIG welding doesn't put a lot of sparks and rubbish around the engine room. We can keep it pretty clean. I do need to buff the paint off, and then we can start filling this tank with diesel.
Here Dame's removing the paint using a 3M poly paint strip disc. After it's tagged, Dame's trying to level up or square it off as much as possible. Don't forget that nothing's straight on a boat, it's not easy.
Ow!
All done, lovely jubbly. A while back I tried to seal these bungs by tapping them out and putting thread sealant in, and it didn't work. And then I realised that I wasn't letting the thread sealant set for long enough, so I let it set for 24 hours and put them in, and I thought that worked. And then after a few weeks it started leaking again. So I've got a different type of thread sealant this time we're going to use. So to prep for this, I've buffed the paint off using a wire wheel, and then I've gone through and acetoned everything that I can to get it as clean as possible before I TIG weld it. TIG doesn't really like stuff in the weld. Electric thread sealant available where all good TIG welders are sold. So fuel transfer port is welded in. We've got the two 1/2-inch drains, one for fuel, one for water, and then right at the very bottom we've got the sight glass, and that connects to the ball valve that's at the top up there. So everything's basically pointing upwards, which is what we needed. Over here you can see that ball valve's basically sticking straight out, so we have to take that one off once we can open this tank. This tank's full of fuel, so we need to empty that tank in order to swap that ball valve around to allow for the holding tanks to go in. But it's finally time to seal this hatch up and then start moving fuel from the tank on this side to the tank just behind me. All of the fuel tanks on Brupeg are sealed using a 3mm nitrile rubber sheet. You can see me putting it on here, and then on top of this you get a 6mm steel plate which clamps everything shut. Because I like pretty inside the engine room, I'm using stainless nuts on this. They're mild steel threads with stainless nuts. Now never ever put stainless on anything without some sort of anti-seize going on. So this is a anti-seize compound that I put on each thread, do the nut up, and then we'll be able to get it off in the future. Using a torque wrench, I make sure that every nut is set to the exact same tension, and that way we know that this lid is not going to leak. Whenever I torque bolts up, I like to write what the torque was and the date that I did that on, just so future reference. Time for Burke to get stuck into the genset area. We need to plasma out this old water tank mount and any of the other random bits of steel that are hanging around inside this area, so it's a nice clean spot when the genset goes in.
A little bit more tidying. And of course a little housework.
Normally in Brupeg's engine room, there's nothing in this part of the boat, the back end of the boat. So to orientate you, fuel tank hatch just behind me. This is the back corner of the boat, the starboard side of the boat. So starboard aft of the engine room, if you're in the old English. These two fittings here are air bleeds for the keel cooling that runs underneath where I'm sitting right now. So the very back end of the keel cooling sort of follows the curve of the hull and comes up. And if you didn't have these, you'd end up with a big air pocket and you wouldn't have good circulation for your engine coolant. So when you're filling up the coolant for the first time, you need to crack these off and bleed all the air out of it and then do them back up once you've got, pipes full of water. We're not going to be able to access these once the tanks are in. So my simple solution to solve this is put a 90-degree right angle into these fittings here and run some pipes up the wall, and that way we can basically uncap them, do whatever we need to once the tanks are in. The pipes will be completely accessible and we don't actually ever have to get back down to these here, so we can leave the tanks in. Every time we change coolant, we don't have to move them. Our monitoring boxes sitting over the back there, you can see there. Beck has also gone through and unbolted the little Kubota. We have the start of our bleed tube. They'll be put firmly against the wall and everything when we know where we need to. We'll do that after we put the tanks in. So for now they're finished. This tank here on the left, that's been stripped out of all of its pipes. We're going to start transferring the fuel across to this tank on the right. So we've got a little 12 volt pump just down here, this wee guy here. That's going to do the transfer, but we are using, some may recognise this as a water gauge. This is a gauge that we're hoping is going to last 1 tank of fuel. That'll give us the ability to mark on our new sight glass. You can see that pink tube there, that's a fuel safe tube. That is going to allow us to mark out how much fuel we've got, and we're hoping we're going to get relatively accurate readings with this gauge, and then it's going to die.
DC supply, yeah.
Alright, cool. Yep.
Yep.
Unfortunately, you have to hold this switch.
That's not a good idea for a few hours.
No. See how there's duct tape all over it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will take some time.
There it is, right there. Yeah, 67. The 70 litres is basically the bottom of that.
Little by little, piece by piece, I take back what's been stolen from me. Little by little, piece by piece, until I'm complete. I got my eyes on you, and you got no clue what I'm supposed to do. I can't help myself. Little by little, piece by piece, I take back what's been stolen from me. Little by little, piece by piece, until I'm complete.
Back to looking like a work site, so I need to do a bit of welding over the back here. So you can see I've got a little bit ground off there, a little bit ground off there, a wee bit just here, and a little bit just over the back there. I'm going to be using my TIG torch, and we're going to be welding these guys on, basically stainless steel chain links, and they're going to help us to strap these tanks down. These tanks are bolted at the front, going along this rib just here, and there's also two big straps that hoik from the back of the tank to the front of the tank and then ratchet up nice and tight. I'm doing both because I don't necessarily trust either to be perfect, so two of them are going to be more than enough to allow for any sort of discrepancy in strength. I think the correct terminology when you're doing this in Australia is time your kangaroo down sport. This is the first time that I've used the new Unimig TIG welder, or the TIG part of that multi-process welder. I used the quick set function, like it's got basically a smart set function where you can just get in there and set what you need to do and it figures out all the smarts for you. It's actually got another menu behind the scenes where you can start to really tune it, and I started doing that in this case, and man, this thing was impressive.
My thoughts have never been clearer. I see what you're doing to me now.
The paint that we're using to cover up these welds is Jodomastic 605. It's a bulletproof paint that can go underwater if needed.
While Buick finishes painting and then carries on with the transfer of the diesel, Damien lifts the hatch ready for the holding tanks to go in.
The one thing that I know is stronger. Love is blind and no one's perfect. Platinum seems so shallow, 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 shallow. But you are bright white gold. They made us lose our focus. The very same hands that formed us. Go build
The last couple of jobs before the tanks go in, so you can see on this side we've got 90-degree fittings on these ball valves that point everything up basically. Essentially it means that it doesn't come out from the wall very far. We need to do the same over here. So we haven't got any stainless fittings, we managed to get some bronze, so we're going to be using bronze to turn these up and get them out of the way of the tanks. I've got some nitrile rubber here, so this is a roll of 1.5mm rubber. We're going to be laying that on the ribs, and that's what the tanks sit on, so that they don't actually ever sit on the ribs themselves, they sit on these rubber strips. And then with the links that were welded in earlier, these are the chain links that were welded down, that's where our straps are going to go, and we'll probably be having rubber under those corners on the straps so no chafing happens either.
I will be holding on to the one thing that I know is stronger. Love is blind and no one told us. Platinum seems so shallow, shallow, shallow.
So engine bay's prepped, we're ready to go. Time to start lifting these tanks in. We'll chain block them down and then get them into position at the back end of the engine room.
You got ice like summer sky. If smart could kill or die. And now it starts to rain, so let's enjoy it. I can't believe that this is real. And the way you make me feel, you make me wanna sing, and so I do.
There we have it, tanks sitting where they need to go. Down the front here, on this edge and that edge we need to put bolts, and then a couple of straps that go over each tank. And this is what it looks like with the straps on and the bolts in.
I'll be by your side, and when I do get to see your smile, I'm up in the clouds and now we're apart.
In the next episode, the motor goes in.